Welcome to the Recruiting Stories podcast, where we celebrate recruiting by exploring the stories of leaders and top performers by digging into their stories and understanding how recruiting has impacted their journey and their success. All right, welcome back to the Recruiting Stories podcast, powered by Cover 3 Consulting. I'm your host, Adrian Chapman, and today our guest is Carrie Ballenger. Carrie, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So Carrie is the Vice President of Sales, National Accounts for Need It Now. Carrie, would you mind just giving us a little bit of a background of kind of who you are and, where you come from in the transportation industry and prior to that?
Sure. It's kind of an interesting story how I got here. I started in recruiting many years ago, and I loved recruiting. I loved finding people jobs. It was very fulfilling, but I traveled a lot. I staffed clerical people, managers, and then I got into healthcare recruiting. So I staffed a lot of nurses, and then they gave me a couple districts. Got divorced, and I couldn't travel anymore. I had a small child. So I actually got into home building for a very brief period of time. And I was a project manager. So I was meeting with architects about putting footings in foundations, which I had no idea what I was talking about, but I muddled through that. And as I was doing that, I met my husband, who owned a very small delivery company here in St. Louis. And we started, talking and this and that, and it went relatively quickly. We ended up getting married, and I said, well, if I'm going to run a business, why don't I run yours? And he said, okay. And he worked out of his house. They had one account, him and a partner. They had one account, not very big, but it provided a lot of money for them. It's just one account, put all your eggs in one basket kind of thing. So I said, can I be the boss? And they said, yeah. And so I said, all right, let's get some warehouses. Let's make a go of it. So we did, and we got a couple of warehouses, and then we got a couple more, and we branched out into the Midwest, and then we branched out and got some agents across the country. And that's the story of how I got into transportation and home delivery in a nutshell.
Really cool. Yeah, that's really cool. Now, did you focus on any specific type of movement or fulfillment or product? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, when I first got in it, I didn't know what I was doing at all. My husband, they ran off a customer's dock. They didn't have any warehouses. So, my first thing is let's get a warehouse. And we got a relatively small warehouse at first. We got about 15,000 square feet. And I thought, well, this is going to be great. We'll get an account, a couple of counts, and we'll just get some trucks and run it out of it. So I started talking, to companies about receiving the product in and doing the final mile. So we focused on the final mile because that's what we did off the customer dock. We filled up the warehouse in 3 months with final mile customers, and the need for it in St. Louis was really, really strong. So the sales component of it wasn't very difficult. I'm always just somebody that'll get on the phone and call people and say, hey, who delivers your stuff in St. Louis? Can I do it for you? So we focused on that final mile piece of it. And we focused on big and bulky. So that's what they did. So that's what I did. Focused on furniture, appliances, cabinets, anything that took 2 men. That's really cool.
I want to loop back, and we'll talk more about that here in a little bit, just kind of how that grew, and then how you exited that, and how you got to where you are today. Talk to me about the recruiting side, right? So you said you placed a variety of different roles, healthcare, clerical, different things like that. Was that for staffing agency? And do you feel like that prepared you for your next season of life when it came to your career? Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, actually, I do think that being in staffing was a good segue into logistics because I did a lot of different things in staffing. I was a direct hire recruiter, so I would find you, and I would find you a job, and I would get a fee, kind of like what you do, exactly like what you do. And then I did temporary staffing, so I'd have an on-premise account where people needed 30 people to run the line today, and then the next day they'd need 10 people. So I would supplement their staffing with contingent workforce so they can ebb and flow as their business needed it. And I think that really is an easy transition into logistics, because if you're running a warehouse, you have peak season that's very, very busy, and you need more people than you need whenever it's slow season, and you have to keep everybody busy or you're going to lose their staff, or you lose your staff. So I think there's a lot of parallels between the two. So I think it it prepared me nicely to understand the ebbs and flows of the logistics industry during peak and non-peak seasons.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like at least from having been in transportation and in staffing, the dealing with, I feel like, just constant change and communicating between multiple parties.
Yep.
You can't do that. Transportation is probably not for you. Recruiting is not for you, right? You got to stand in the middle, and you got to be able to hold up both ends for things to work well. So I think that's really cool. Talk to me about just final mile and kind of how that's progressed over the past decade. I assume it probably looks a little bit different today than it did 10 years ago. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, it really does. Back in the day when I first started, retailers just wanted to get their product delivered. There wasn't KPIs and on-time metrics and performance, and just here's my stuff, get it delivered. There was no visibility. There were no visibility milestones where they had to know where everything was every second of every day. As a matter of fact, when we very first started, we routed everything manually. So we would get a stack of orders, and I would have two people and myself, and we would sit there and we memorized every zip code in St. Louis and in the areas, and we would route them like this. And then we would fine route them. So then we'd take that stack and we would route them like this, and that would be the routes. We would handwrite all the manifest back in the day. Fast forward to today, we have routing software, we have complete visibility, we have electronic capturing of signatures and pictures, and that's really what has to happen to be competitive in today's market. You can't be a mom and pop shop in home delivery and not be able to provide those things, or you won't survive. So a ton of things have changed. What hasn't changed, in my opinion, is you still are going to need two people to deliver big and bulky, and they have to know what they're doing. You cannot just throw two guys off the street and give them, put stuff in the back of an El Camino and go deliver it. You have to know what you're doing. You have to know the angles to get up to the third floor in Chicago. So that piece of it hasn't changed, but everything else definitely has.
Yeah, and if I remember right, a lot of your background, with the company that you ended up selling was furniture home delivery, right?
Yep. Yeah, it was a lot of 90% furniture. We did a lot of cabinets as well. Then we did get into like some exercise equipment and some appliances, but the majority of it was furniture. Yeah.
Furniture. And it would make sense that people need someone who can white glove and install and do different things like that. What challenges do you face there? Because I feel like, in transportation, you think of the full truckload, you think of LTL, you think of, international, and getting a big box moved from one place to another. Certainly there are complications, they're across the border, right? But then getting it across the threshold in a home or a business with, and then having something in, that's a whole different animal. What challenges do people not think about when it comes to that type of shipping?
Yeah, I think that at the end of the day, it's really the last 10 minutes of the delivery. The customer, the end user isn't seeing the first mile, the middle mile, they're seeing that final mile. So you're really an extension of the retailer. It's an intimate thing to go into somebody's house and deliver their bedroom set. So you have to really train the guys or gals that are going into the home to make sure that they're treating the house like they should. And I think the biggest challenge that I had doing that was making sure my guys in the field understood that, understood they're delivering it to a grandma, or, they're delivering to somebody's mom, and a woman that might be home alone. And, it can be a dicey situation if they don't come off as true professionals. So that would be my biggest thing that I always would worry about, is how can I constantly train my guys in the field to make sure that the customer that they were going into their house, that they felt at ease with the guys in the house. Because it could be a little, if you're a single gal, it could be a little bit scary with two random guys coming in your house.
Yeah, just thinking out loud, like, it's could be an opportunity to win or lose, right? They're right there at the end on that delivery. And even if the delivery was late or had challenges or anything, but if it was done really well at the end, with great customer service, that experience could make up for everything else, I feel like. And you could win in a big way because it's face to face. It's so personal when somebody's bringing something into your home. So that's great. It's good.
Yeah, for sure. And we did a lot of, training with the drivers just to, you know, remind them what they can't say. Like, you'd be surprised if, you just made a flippant comment with like, "Oh, that's a really nice piece of art." People don't like that. They don't like you commenting on their house. That means you're looking around. And so you have to just maintain the utmost professionalism at all time. And that's really what we tried to drive home to our teams.
That's good. Talk to me about how, at some point you ended up selling your business, right?
Yeah.
Was that, was that a plan all along, or was that like, hey, at some point we just realized, hey, I think it's time, or we had an opportunity and were approached by someone? What was that process like for you?
Well, like I said, when I got into it, I said, "Can I be the boss?" And my husband and his partner said, "Yeah." And we had a really good run for about 10 years. And looking back, we were really good at it. And you don't really know how good you are. My team was at doing this until we got out of it and I started looking at other companies. But about 10 years in, we kind of had not a falling out, but we came to start as we grew, we disagreed with our partner on how to grow the business. So we ended up buying him out. My husband and I bought him out. Probably 2 years before we sold, because we had talked about selling it, but evaluating a company, he had different ideas than I had, and we just couldn't get on the same page, even with what he thought we should sell it for. So we ended up buying him out, and that wasn't pleasant, but it happened. And then we forged ahead for a couple of years, and I wasn't really looking to sell it at that time, but I was on the phone with somebody who worked at Need It Now, who purchased it, and they said, they wanted me to be an agent. And so I was talking through him, and he said, why don't we just buy your company? And I just flippantly said, "Well, everything's for sale." And then it just started a process. And, I really, really liked all the people at Need It Now. I thought they were great. I thought they were smart. It was a long process, but we got through it and we successfully ended up selling it.
That's really cool. That's really cool.
Yeah.
The power of networking, right? And just being open to have those conversations with other people in the industry. I think that's pretty cool. Now, Need It Now, tell me a little bit about Need It Now, because it's pretty vast, right? You have a big network. And isn't it a subsidiary of a bigger company as well? Or tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So Need It Now purchased my company right before COVID happened. And then, of course, we went through all the COVID. And then we're in 24. So in December of 22, Geodis, which is a company out of France, large freight forwarder, purchased Need It Now. We went through all of last year kind of just in a transition and, kind of integrating and things like that. And now we'll be known as Geodis, but we are part of the Geodis team right now. And really what we can do is, it's remarkable the services that we can provide for a retailer or a manufacturer or anybody that needs product moved. So we now can handle the ocean lanes. We can handle the ports, so we can handle the consolidation work at the ports, the dray to get it into the warehouses. Before we deconsolidate, we can handle the line hauls. We have a whole capacity solutions division that does all the full truckloads in the line hauls to the hubs. We have a network of hubs across the country. And then we have obviously can do all the final mile. We can do store pool distribution, final mile into the customer home, direct to consumer. So really, once I get my teeth into a retailer, I'm like, what do you need? You can have all of this. You can have part of this. I'm happy to develop a solution that fits what you need, but just talk to me about what your headaches are. And that's kind of the approach of how I spin it all to everybody.
That's cool. Do you have, in what you do now, do you have like an ideal client size or type?
So I can sell all of that. And my job is really I don't know everything about everything, obviously. My wheelhouse is that final mile. So that's my favorite type of thing to sell. But my job is to bring everybody to the table if there's other solutions that need to be presented to the customer. So I do that. But when I'm just selling the stuff I want to sell before I open it up to other things, it's really the final mile piece of it. So we actually have what's called a final mile complete distribution network. So I'll just give you a quick example. A couple times a week, we go out to California, pick up some furniture from a retailer, and we bring it back, inject it into our network at one of our warehouses. So Indianapolis, or this one happens to go to Atlanta. We break it all apart, put it on trucks, move it to the hubs, and then deliver it. So that's kind of the thing I like to sell, is that big and bulky furniture distribution. We can inject it anywhere in the country, and then we can deliver it into the consumer home. And the best part about it is when we move it in a full truckload environment. We don't send it LTL. LTL causes a lot of damages and that type of thing. We move it in a full truckload of environment, and it's always full. So it's going to reduce the opportunity for damage and those types of things. So that's my favorite thing to sell currently.
Do you have an outlook for what you think the year looks, like moving forward? I know there's obviously there's been a lack of demand in the transportation market in general. So sentiment seems to be down, generally, but I think there's hope that between an election year and just maybe more consumer demand on the horizon, data that shows otherwise. What are your thoughts there? Anything?
I think everybody spent all their money on home improvement during COVID.
Yeah.
Obviously, everybody they spent a lot of money, and the times were really good, from that perspective. Obviously, there were supply chain issues, but from that perspective, from a final mile piece of it, but it has softened, obviously. And I think that, it'll get back to the baseline that it was, and everybody's just going to have to work for it. You might have to work a little bit harder. It's not easy to cherry pick right now. You have to prove your value to people, because it's not as robust as it was, where they needed us so much. So now we have to prove our value and show that we can take care of them and really provide the service that they deserve, moving their freight and getting it into the customer home.
Yeah, for sure. The thing I feel like I've repeated to a lot of people is like, not that I've been in transportation for a decade now, but like, not that I've been, like some of these folks who have been in for, 20, 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
But the last few years seem incredibly volatile, just from a demand standpoint. And so I feel like if you have weathered the storm in the past, 3, 4, or 5 years here, chances are that you will do well in the future if you are stay consistent, and like you said, prove your value and make sure you're doing a good job for your clients, whatever that is. So
yeah, I would agree with that, because there have been some really good times in the last 5 years, and then it's been pretty lean. So if you can figure out how to adjust your business, going back to the staffing and the ebbs and flows of it all, if you can figure out how to adjust your business and survive with those ebbs and flows, then you'll probably be in it for the long haul.
Yeah, sure. Let's talk back a little bit more on recruiting, right? So you were a business owner for, in transportation for a decade, VP of sales and national accounts here now. Obviously, you've had to hire people doing that. Did you have a philosophy on hiring then? And is it the same now? How's it changed?
I think it's probably the same. I don't necessarily try to hire the smartest person. I'm not the smartest person. That's why I surround myself with people that are smarter than me. But nobody knows everything about everything. So I try to hire people that are intelligent, but more importantly, they are open to learn. They're teachable, they're coachable, and they have some level of moxie or grit or a drive where they want to get things done. And so that's, I've hired people that have no experience in transportation at all throughout the years. And I've taught them, I can teach them the process. I can teach them the technology to use, as long as they have that drive and they want to do it. So that's been my philosophy. It's more about the person than making sure that they've done everything that I want them to do in the future. I can teach them that part. So it's more about the person.
Yeah, two things I heard you say there were just like obviously like a natural internal drive, and then two, just teachability, right? And so I think teachability also requires humility, right? And so when you see someone who is humble enough to learn and say, I don't know it all, to me, that's just always been a hallmark sign of like, great, we've got something we can work with, even if you don't know how. We can get you in a position where you can. you can learn. So I love that. Um, do you have any stories from the youth, whether when you were in staffing, or to now, that was hey, this was either an inspirational or just a funny story or anything like that from hey, I made a bad hire, made a good hire, this happened during an interview or anything like that?
Well, I will tell you, I don't, I'll just tell you a story. So when I first got into staffing, I was 28 years old, and I got hired by this phenomenal group of women at a company called Spirion, and they were probably 40 and they just knew what they were doing, and they were very, very inspirational. So we had this entire training of how to direct hire. I was hired as a direct hire recruiter. So I find people, I find them jobs, I make money. So we had this training, and it said, you're supposed to do this every day, this every day, this every day, this every day. So I, by the book, did everything they told me. So one thing that we had to do was called a power hour. So every day for 1 hour, we would be on the phone making cold calls, trying to generate jobs for people, for candidates that we could fill. And I did this so much and so often, and the room would be so loud. I remember I would crawl under my desk because I would get somebody on the phone. And so I would be under my desk talking because it would be so loud in there. And some people wouldn't do power hour, some people would, but I would do it every day. And I called this one company so many times because I had a target list and I really wanted to get into this company. So I called him every week for like weeks and weeks and weeks. And one day, he called the branch I worked at back, and he asked, I guess, for the boss or whatever. And he gets her on the phone and he said, there's this gal, Carrie, she keeps calling us. Can you please tell her to stop calling us? And my boss was like, well, you can either be a recruiting source or you can be a customer. So pick which one you want to be. And she had my back, and they never did give me any business. So I turned it into a recruiting source, but I was gung ho to get this company, and I didn't, but I recruited some people from them.
That's awesome. I
That's kind
appreciate
of my
that.
style.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You got to be persistent. And,
Yeah.
if we're not going to recruit for you, we'll recruit from you. So, absolutely,
Right. Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, I saw in your profile something, and feel if you don't want to share about it, that's more than fine. What is Chief? I saw Chief on your profile. Could you tell me a little bit about that? Is that something that's you're
Yeah.
willing
So
to?
Chief is a networking group for women.
Cool.
So it's for VP women and above, and you have to be invited in, and you can have your company sponsored, or it could be self-funded or whatever. And it's a networking group for women, and it's really an opportunity to meet other people that are at the VP level or above, and really just share experiences about what it's like trying to climb a corporate ladder or get to the next level, or if you want to be educated on how to get on a board, or if you want to be educated on some more diversity training or things like that. So it's really just a resource of personal development. And I was invited to it, I guess, last year,
Cool.
maybe a little bit over a year ago, and I went ahead and joined it. And I really like it because you have a core meeting once a month with the same group of people, and then you have a like, it's called like a guide. So she basically brings topics, and we all talk through them, and they're not necessarily work related. Some of them are just you're trying to juggle your kids and your husband and your job and be successful, and just to know that other women out there are doing the same thing, and you have a connection, and you have you made a friend that is experienced the same thing you are, and you have somebody to talk to. It's almost like a little bit of a therapy group as well. So I've enjoyed it, and that's what it is.
That's awesome. That's very good.
Yeah.
But I appreciate that, because I mean, transportation, especially, I would say is not necessarily a highly diverse industry, as you know.
Yeah.
So I think about something like that, and there's probably a giant opportunity for, in my opinion, I think there is a giant opportunity for women in the transportation industry, and you definitely have to band together. So I think that's
Yeah.
great. What advice would you have for a young woman in the transportation industry, looking to expand her career?
I would say it's a little bit rough, being a woman and primarily a male dominated industry. I've had people be not very nice to me because I am a female. So I would say stick to your guns, just educate yourself, gain all the knowledge you can, and then stand firm in what you believe in, and don't reduce your values or feel less than just because you're a woman. I can stand toe to toe with just about anybody. And there have been times that I didn't want to speak my mind because I was intimidated when I was younger. And the older I get, that doesn't happen anymore. I know what I know, and I'm passionate about what I do. I believe in it. I'm good at it. And I think that that's what I would tell a younger person. Just be confident, learn as much as you can, and don't be afraid to ask questions, and give yourself some grace. I cannot tell you how many times I've screwed things up, and you just have to put your shoes back on the next day and keep going.
That's good. Yeah, competence creates confidence. In my experience, and big young ladies especially, put yourselves in those rooms and make some of those mistakes, and you'll learn from them. So that's great advice. That's awesome. Well, cool. Well, I've enjoyed talking with you, Carrie. Obviously, got to know you a little bit over the last few years here, and think you're doing great things in the industry. When you look back on your career, just life, I guess, is there any books that you've had that have been, that you would share with the audience that have been helpful in your growth in your career path?
Well, I mostly read fiction. So I mostly read Jack Carr, the Terminal List, and NYPD Red series and stuff like that. But there's been a couple books that I've read throughout the years. I've read a lot of books. One I read a long, long time ago back in staffing. It was called Managing from the Heart. I thought that was a great book. I don't know who read it, but it talks about back then you didn't do it as much as you do now, try to make sure your employees were very much taken care of. And that's what that was all about way back then. So, it's probably people do it all the time now, but they didn't necessarily do it then. But I'll tell you, the best book I ever read, Adrian, was called, it was written by Shep. It's not even a book. It's a lesson. It's Shep Hyken, Lessons from a Cab Driver, something like that. Yeah. And it's just a real thin book. I actually bought it for every one of my employees at one point.
Yep.
Hold on one sec.
Yep.
It's a real thin book, and it's about this cab driver, Frank, that was a regular cabbie. He'd go pick up his dirty cab every day. He'd go get fares. He'd go get tips. He knew that if he gave good customer service, he would get a tip. And then he learned that if he gave exceptional customer service, he would create a loyal customer that every time they came into town, they would call him and they would tip him twice as much. So he asked his cab company if he could take the cab home. He detailed it every day. He had bottles of water in it. He had snacks for him, and it tells a story about how he really created a business with the same customers over and over. And I'm extremely passionate about customer service. And I don't know if that helped me get there, but I've always been like that. And I think it's a great story about how the difference between taking care of a customer and giving a customer exceptional service. So I would encourage anybody that has young customer service reps or anything like that to find that book, read it, and have a power hour of lunch, a lunch and learn with them or whatever.
That's good. I love that. I'll make sure I put that in the show notes. But I had someone give me similar advice in the past couple of years here that I run Cover 3. But kind of the example that they gave was they asked me a question. There are some restaurants that you will go to or not go to based off of the service that is provided, by the experience that you have. And I never really thought about it that way, but when I thought about it, I was like, yeah, you're right. There's experiences that you're like, yeah, if I've had a bad experience or it's dingy or not clean, well, I'm not going to go back there. But if I had a great experience, then I'm going to go there every single time. I'll pay more for that experience. So that's great. Very cool.
That's what I think. I think that, people, it's so hard to earn money these days, and everything costs so much money that if you're in the service industry at all, it's your obligation to make sure that people have the very best experience possible when they're dealing with you. That's kind of the philosophy that I take into everything I do.
That's good. What advice would you give yourself, your 20-year-old self, if you were looking back on your career now?
Oh gosh, I would just say, if I knew then what I know now, I would not let anybody, I think most women have gone through people not being nice to them or just, being mistreated. And I'm not trying to get into all of that, but, being mistreated in a male dominated world way back then. I'm 53 too. So I would just say, don't be intimidated, go for it. Figure out what you want to do, figure out how to get there, use all the resources. Now you have the internet, and I didn't have it back then. So, do whatever you need to do to get where you want to be in life. Find yourself a trusted advisor, bounce ideas and go for it. And like I said before, I think it's very important that you give yourself some grace to make some mistakes along the way.
That's good. I can echo that. The internet is a fabulous resource. It's a fabulous distraction if you let it be as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Mentorship is a key as well. Find someone a little further down the road than you.
Mm-hmm.
See what you can do to help them. Take them to coffee now and then. And if you can be a support to those people, it'll come back around at some point in time that may be helpful for you too. So I love that. Well, Carrie, conversation's been awesome. If someone wants to get in contact with you, whether they just want to connect with you, they want to ask you for advice, they want you to move all their products,
Sure.
what should they do to get a hold of you?
Well, first of all, you can look me up on LinkedIn. I post a couple times a day, and I always post my phone number on there and my email address. So I'm all over the internet like that. You can Google me. My name is Carrie Ballenger, and my personal email is carrie@carrieballenger.com. So it'll be like that forever, even if I ever do decide to switch jobs, which isn't going to happen anytime soon. Or they can call me at 314-713-4703. And then I do want to say that for everybody who's listening, I've used Adrian in the past to fill positions for me. And Adrian, you've always done a great job, very responsive. So I would encourage anybody listening to give you a shot if they're looking for a recruiter.
Well, that means a lot. Thank you so much, Carrie. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Well, thank you for joining us again, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Talk to you soon. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Recruiting Stories podcast. If you haven't yet, subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Check us out on LinkedIn, Adrian Chapman, and Cover 3 Consulting is our company page. Also check out our website, www.cov3consulting.com. Again, thanks for joining us, and we just simply want to remind you that you can change the world by putting people in a position where they can do the most good, and you do that by recruiting. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you next time.